Welcome back, my Exposing Grief YouTube channel viewers, where we are removing that stigma of grief, exposing it for what it truly is, which is that natural and healthy way of living and loving. I'm bringing to you yet another interview. I'm sitting with a fellow grief therapist who has started a new grief program. So she's here to talk to us about what that grief program is. I cannot wait for you to meet her and hear what she has to say. So let's not waste any more time and let's dive in. I'm excited to bring another guest to you. Happy November. I don't know how we're already almost to the end of the year. I'm not sure where it went, but I'm happy to be here with you. I'm happy that you are here, and I'm happy to be sitting with my guest, Stacy Saindon, who is an LMFT like myself, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she specializes in both grief and trauma, which is absolutely wonderful. That is a combo that I don't know if we necessarily run into very often. Stacy, you can push back if you don't agree, but I'm excited for her to share what she has to bring to you. So I won't waste any more time. Stacy, I'm going to turn it over to you and have you share with our wonderful viewers a little bit about yourself and what got you into your line of work.
Great. Well, hi, Brittany. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to being here. I would say what led me into this work was really my intergenerational family legacy of grief. I lost my mom. I identify as a motherless daughter. So I lost my mom when I was 24. She lost her mom when she was 12. And my dad lost his mom when he was 18. And during that time in their life, there wasn't services, resources, support for them. For my mom, she sort of preserved her grief almost as if in a time capsule and never processed that. So up until her age of 58, she still had a fresh grief response whenever she accessed the pain of her mom. And then I had my dad at the other end that just completely suppressed it, completely shut down and never talked about the loss of his mom. So fast forward, when I lost my mom, I had no template for grief. I thought it was so big, so scary, something to avoid, since that was something I learned. But yet I also was so curious about it and confused about it. So I read every book I could get my hands on. I went back to get my master's in therapy and counseling. I did a hospice internship. I really wanted to understand what grief was all about. So that really started informing my clinical work. And then personally, I had lost other people along the way. My father passed 10 years ago. I've lost some really close friends suddenly, one to an aneurysm, one to drowning. So grief has just been sort of sprinkled into my life. And I wanted to figure out a way to help people be able to unpack and process grief and not make it so scary and something to avoid. So that's what led me to this.
I love that, and bless you for doing your own work, because that can be really hard, especially like you spoke to this piece of it was something that was really scary and something I wanted to avoid, and yet here you are how many years later, not only doing it yourself but also encouraging and guiding others to do the same. So bless you for doing the work that you do. It's not easy, and it's also very needed.
Yes.
So thank you. Can you share a little bit more about your practice and kind of the services
Yeah.
that you offer?
Yeah. So I have a private practice in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I really would say focus on grief, trauma, relational wounds, and cultivating joy. That's a new thing I've added to that.
Love it.
We really, when we think about some of the challenges we go through, we can get mired in that, but we still need to really cultivate and live a life of joy. So in my private practice, of course, I see folks struggling with mental illnesses. But when it comes to grief, I was like, that's not a mental illness. It isn't something that can be treated in a medical model. It isn't something that needs to be pathologized. So I developed a separate program that's called Grieve and Love Well, and it's a grief coaching program that really helps support people on their natural and normal response to loss, which is grief. So I kind of have my foot in two different worlds as a coach and as a therapist.
Yes, I love that. And actually, that's why we have you here today, is to talk more about that grief coaching program. So can you share with our viewers a little bit more about what that is, maybe what the structure is, and what engaging in that coaching program or group might look like for them?
Yeah. So it's a 6-month program, and it's comprised in a couple different components. We have a self-paced curriculum that folks can watch online, and it's about 10 different modules with about 3 to 4 lessons under each module. And it's broken up into 3 groups. The first one is what was lost. So we really explore what was lost, what the identity of it is for you to be a griever, what type of griever you are. We do a lot of work on creating what's called a grief first aid kit, where I think the biggest thing folks need to do if they're going to recover from grief is to have the resources, the internal resources to do the work. It's so dysregulating to look at grief. The way I look at it, it's like leaning into a fire and your eyebrows get singed. Like it's so hot and so scary that we need to have some support around ways to do that. And then the second part of the modules is what remains. So really exploring, so who am I now without this person? How do I process the feelings? You know, again, grief is one of those things that people don't know how to process. It's like swallowing a whale. So we really take it bit by bit and break it down into just smaller pieces so we can digest it. We can allow the feelings. We can express it. And we have lots of different experiential activities and journal prompts to really help us do that. And then the last part of the curriculum is what what the future holds, excuse me. So thinking about how do I continue bonds with my loved one? Because we don't suddenly get amnesia when we are grieving. The goal isn't to be like my dad and just pretend that mom doesn't exist and bury her literally and emotionally. We continue a bond, but in today. So we bring the person with us in current day, future, this time and space, and then build a life without them. So it's really this a teeter-totter of putting feet in two different worlds. And then we also have a weekly support group. So it's a 90-minute support group where folks pop on and people use it for different ways. Some people really want to unpack the modules and what they're learning about themselves and talk about that. Some people might have an important anniversary coming up and really want to explore that. Some people just like to listen and just sort of be a silent witness for folks. And then we also have a daily Facebook private group, so people can get daily support if they need to. They can like pop on, share stories, memes, their successes, what they're working on. So that is the program. And I would say the people who would best benefit from that is really anyone that's not in fresh grief, as I call it. And I refuse to put a timeline on that because it could be months, it could be years, it could be days, it could be decades. Like my mom, even though 46 years later, she was still in fresh grief with her mom. So even though I created this actually as a love letter for my mom, because I really wanted her to be able to do this work, she actually wouldn't have been able to do it yet. You know, she would need probably some individual support first. She would need to have some resources or some coping strategies to do the work. I think people in fresh grief, you're just keeping your head above water. You're just like, what is the next best thing I can do in this moment to just kind of keep going? So, yeah.
Yeah, you answered like all of my questions, which is awesome, right? I wanted to know, and I'm sure the viewers want to know of like, okay, well, when might I know if this is a good thing for me along my grief journey? And you said typically it's for people who aren't in their fresh grief, right? Okay, well, let's talk about what that means. When might there be a time where this group wouldn't be beneficial? If you're in your fresh grief, okay, what is fresh grief? And you covered that, right? If you feel like you're keeping your head above water, would there be any other things that you would add to either what people could look for to say, this group actually might be really good for me right now, other than listening to their
Right.
intuition? Or if there's anything that people can look for that it's like, maybe this isn't the right time for me, aside from this fresh grief?
Yep. I think there needs to be a motivation, like an intrinsic motivation. I think well-meaning loved ones might be like, you need help, you should go talk to someone. And, that may be true, but really what I hear when I hear that is that I can't tolerate your grief. I can't tolerate your pain. Go get fixed so that I can feel better. So that I want people to feel the intrinsic motivation. I want them to be able to realize I'm suffering, that this is painful, and that I don't have to do it alone anymore, that I deserve to feel better, that I could get support from a group. So there really has to be that internal motivation. And I'm trying to remember the other part of your question.
Any other things that people would be looking for, or if something, what would be a situation other than the fresh grief where it may not be beneficial or it may cause like more harm?
Yeah, I think for folks that can't contain, like my mom would flood her feelings. She wouldn't be able to contain it. So there has to be that sort of level of being able to go, okay, I'm going to contain my feelings so I can be present for a group member. Since this is a group format, it's different than individual. So for folks that can kind of straddle that line of being able to contain what's coming up for them, being present for someone else, and opposite, be able to show up and be there for others.
Yeah. I love that. What if there are viewers who are watching this going, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. I love this, but I also just don't know yet. Do you offer like a free consultation or something where they
Yeah.
can sit down with you to explore if this is the next best step
Yes.
for them?
Absolutely. The first step would be to go to my website, which is grievelovewell.com. And on there, I have a 15-minute video that kind of answers questions. And I wanted to do that because when I think of myself as a consumer, when I'm like, I don't want to commit to anything, I want to get this information without anyone like pressuring me. So that would be step one. And then if it does feel like it could be helpful, you could email me, and I have the email on my website too. And I'd be happy to do a phone consult or a Zoom consult to just chat and see, would this be a good service for you? And based on the people I've talked to, some are and some aren't, and that's okay. And I'm always here for when that time comes to be able to
Yes.
come back and consider the group.
And I'm guessing if they're not a good fit for the group, you don't just leave them hanging,
Yeah,
right? You give them different resources, referrals, so
absolutely.
they can do the work that is appropriate for them at that time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Viewers, I will be putting her email and her website and all that good information below. So don't feel like you have to scatter to write it down or keep playing this back to get it. Stacy, is there anything else that you want the viewers to know, whether it's about the group, yourself, your practice, grieving, registration, anything? Do you want them to know anything else that we haven't touched on?
What I'd like to say is that the griever in me recognizes and sees the griever in you, and that no one should have to do this alone. Literally, relationships are medicine. And all the research says the best grief outcomes is when you're not alone, you're not isolated, and you're in some sort of group. We're pack animals. We're meant to connect. So the thought of anyone going through grief, like I have the goosebumps right now, the thought of them doing that alone just breaks my heart. You're not alone. There's help.
Yeah. The thought of them actually doing it alone and the thought of them feeling like that's their only option, right? Which is exactly why we're here, right? We want to communicate that message of like, no, 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 don't do it by yourself. We're here. Even if you're not doing some sort of grief group or mental health therapy or anything like that, you can still do the grief process with other people. So I hear you 100%. And this is exactly why I have you on, because every single message you're communicating, I'm like, oh, yes, preach, huh? Right.
Well, and thank you for all of your work, what you're doing to be able to get resources out there and to be able to educate people is such a need.
It is my absolute pleasure. And my hope is that this reaches, whether it's my YouTube videos, my podcast episodes, that it reaches the people who need to hear it and they get at least something from it. So viewers, I hope you're taking something away. Stacy, if they are like, yes, let's go, I'm ready, what are their next best steps? Just visit your website. Is there a registration link? What would their next step be?
So once you go to my website and you watch the video, I get your email. And then the next step would be for them to email me to say, let's do a consultation, then we'll set up some time.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that you just finished one cohort and
Yes.
you're working on starting another. When is
Yes.
that next start date? Are you taking people for that cohort?
Yep, I'm thinking sometime in November. I don't have the date yet, but probably within the next month.
Perfect. Fantastic. So viewers, be sure to reach out to her. This might be a great thing to start as we gear into the holiday seasons. I know holidays are really hard, period, but particularly when we're grieving, it adds a whole new layer. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Stacy's information and all of that stuff is below. My stuff is below as well if you need to reach out to me. Stacy, I can't thank you enough for your time.
It was so nice to spend time with you.
Yes, it was wonderful having you on, and viewers, please reach out. Be sure to subscribe if you have not yet so you don't miss any other content, whether it's myself talking about a grief topic or we have yet another wonderful guest. Be sure to subscribe and we'll see you in December. Stacy, again, as always, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share. Viewers, I hope you found what Stacy had to say insightful. I hope you find intrigue in her grief coaching program. Please be sure to hit her up. Her contact information is below. If you are interested at all, if you have even just the tiniest inkling, please reach out to her and see if her grief program might benefit you. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you have not, because we've got all good things still coming through the end of this year, which I know is only one more month, and into the next year. So please be sure to subscribe. You can reach out to me if you need to. But have a happy holiday season if that is something you celebrate. Honor your grief journey and do this holiday season in a way that feels right to you. We'll see you in December.